Ready to dive into the next call?
Yes.
Cool. I want to talk to Hadi.
Yay, Hadi's back.
It's been a lot of fun talking to Hadi. Let's grab them. Hadi, you're live with Eric and V. How are you doing?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Going good.
Really
How are
good. It's a good day.
It is. It's beautiful out here in North Carolina today. I don't know how it is in Texas.
you? Hot.
Beautiful and hot. Yeah.
Very nice. So,
Yeah.
Vi, it's good to see you back on the show again. It's been a few weeks.
Yeah, it's been a little bit. I was on with Shannon, and then
I
you
was
were
on
on
with
with
Zod,
Zod. So
and
yeah,
yeah.
it's been a couple weeks. How have you been? I heard you guys had a good
Can't
conversation
complain,
last
thankfully.
week.
I think so.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing it.
Yeah, what can we help you with?
So, where did we leave off last time? We were talking about truth. What is the nature of truth? That was a big one.
Yep.
That is a big one.
That which corresponds to reality.
That which corresponds to reality. So, I was saying, I think that we can only really get so close to reality. So
Sure.
truth is more of an ideal that we strive for than something we can actually achieve.
I think those are similar, but not the same.
It depends on, I think there are different definitions of truth as well, right? We can have something that corresponds to reality, like we're in the same room today. That corresponds to reality. That's fairly easy to prove. We've got a camera on us, right? We're like coming in from the same sound system, so our crew knows. But there are other things that are equally real and part of reality that we can't just look at and prove instantly. So while that which corresponds to reality is a good baseline, that doesn't mean that suddenly everything is just as valid as everything else and equally unprovable, right?
Yeah. I think that we're distinguishing, we're blending a little bit between is and ought. So one is a question of ontology, what exists, that what things we can verify are true and existent. And the other is a question of epistemology, the method that we're using, how we know what we know. And so when you're talking about striving towards knowing as many true things as few false things, that's a more epistemic question versus what is true, what is real. The answer that I gave is a little more ontological. It's more, that which corresponds to reality. I think they're both, they both work, but they're just not answering the same question.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So then I guess if we were to put it in those terms, that religion provides an ontological answer where you don't feel that the epistemology of religion is good enough to provide that answer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that is a good way to phrase that. I would agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I don't think there's an epistemic justification given the evidence that I've come across.
Right, and I absolutely love that you brought both of those terms into this, because that's kind of my drum that I beat quite a bit, is you need to start with epistemology, right? And people tend to they can start with ethics or aesthetic or axiology. They can start with ontology. I know when I was a Christian, when I was growing up, I started with ontology to form my basis for rational thought. I was like, okay, I know a few things are true. I know some things just are, and I'm going to go from there. But as I kind of became more skeptical and trained myself in critical thinking, I realized that I think the best way to move forward is to start with epistemology. How do we know things? How do we know that we know things? And then move from there and try and get to ontological claims and axiological ones. So yeah, I think you're spot on with that, Hadi. Religion makes an ontological claim that epistemologically does not satisfy my criteria.
Okay, and I think that is a very fair assessment. But I would say then that maybe that's not necessarily the right approach to be determining your faith. If you want to take your faith in that way. So let me provide an alternative.
Sure.
Pulling back to last week, you mentioned the example of the 5 U's that exist scattered throughout the cosmos that, you insist is true. I can't explain it because it's beyond me to explain it, right? So then what I would say to that is, what does believing in this require of me, right? You mentioned the MLMs. if I'm to believe in MLM, it requires me to invest a lot of my money into a person who is at the top of a hierarchy with the promise that this person will give me back that money.
I
I
disagree. I think you might be putting the cart before the horse.
Okay.
So you invest all of that time and money because you believe, not to believe. You've already obviously made a determination about it in order to have gotten to the point where you're ready to sink your livelihood into it, right?
Oh, that's fair. But I think what I'm saying still holds in that, it's not so much when you're determining whether or not a belief is a good belief, you're looking at what is it asking of you, right? Not necessarily what is it. Because when we talk about, like, for instance, we talk about science, we talked about the grass last time. When it comes to the deep physical properties of grass, I'm not going on to these scientific papers. I'm not replicating these studies. I'm not investing in the billion-dollar lab equipment that it takes to prove to myself, to my own satisfaction, that what these guys are saying is true. No, I look around and I say, well, they have a record of, producing things that I agree with, and they are not asking me to do anything that I'm not comfortable with or that I feel is immoral. So this is something that I can live with.
Right. But I see where you're going with that. And to an extent, I agree. I do want to tweak this a little bit to see if we can find common ground here. So instead of saying whether or not the belief is true and caring about whether it's true, instead, I would say that look at because you only have a limited amount of time and resources in your day, right? So you can't investigate everything to its fullest satisfaction to prove without a doubt every single claim. So you have to choose which ones you look at more closely. And you're saying based on what that claim, how that claim impacts your life and what it's asking of you, that will determine whether or not you look more deeply into it to determine whether or not it's true, correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I agree with you. I don't think it has any bearing on whether or not it's actually true. But I do think that claims that would require more of you or make grand statements about something important like an afterlife or a soul or the existence of a God, for example, do warrant that extra step of really drilling down and looking at it and not just taking it at face value. In the same way we would say that the grass is green. Sure, we'll take that. That's not going to impact our life at all.
Yeah, I can speak, at least for the two of us, we were taught you're in the world, but you're not of the world. There was a big ask for us in our religious backgrounds it was no small thing. It was to remove yourself from society in a very deep and meaningful way, and to limit your behavior to a very, very closely monitored set of actions. And so it definitely was a big ask.
Well, I'm sorry that you guys experienced that. That wasn't really, my experience.
I'm not sad about it. That's okay. It got me here, and it got me where we get to talk to you. So that's a pretty damn good result.
So are you saying then, Hadi, that the way you view religion does not impact your life significantly enough that you would need to go look for these claims that they are true or not?
No, I would say that the way I view religion, it impacts my life positively enough that I don't really feel compelled to investigate the truth claims.
So that is actually pragmatic. That's the pragmatic view.
Yeah.
So if it is beneficial to believe a thing, even if it's not true, would you still hold that it's true?
Depends on how beneficial, right? It depends on how the not trueness of it would, echo out. What are the ramifications of it being not true?
And this is exactly, I think we found exactly the split between where we're coming from, because I don't think, and I don't think you do either, think that beneficiality or a lack of it has any bearing on the truth of it and whether or not we should treat it as true. it's a good, it's useful to be able to weigh the pros and cons. And it's always, coincidentally really nice when the true things are also the things that are beneficial. But when that overlap happens, that is coincidence. It's not a cause and effect situation.
Yeah. So I can give an example. Let's say you have a friend who you just found out is diagnosed with terminal cancer. They've got a week to live. You could decide to tell them that they have a week to live, but what's it going to do? They can't fix it, right? It would cause a lot of stress, but I would argue that we don't have the right to make that decision. Just because pragmatically, that may seem like the best course of action so that they can continue to live a life as long as they can without all of the stress and anxiety, but it also takes away their autonomy. And I think that in a lot of situations like that, you do have removing people's autonomy. In the case of religion, you're removing people's ability to, I don't just want to assume, and we've had a lot of callers call in who say, well, if it's beneficial, if it helps people's lives and they feel better, then what's wrong with them just believing? Well, the wrong thing is we're assuming that they don't have the ability to move on from there. It's this assumption that they just can't mentally grasp or get there. And I think that ultimately we shouldn't do it. We should give people the benefit of the doubt and give them the best evidence and the best tools available so that they can make an informed decision, no matter which way that goes. I would say that is by far the preferable method.
Well, I definitely see what you're saying. But I think that the analogy of the terminal cancer patient is not really a very good one. You could argue that telling that terminal cancer patient would be, would cause them a lot of stress and pain. But on the flip side, it would also give them the time that they need to put their affairs in order, say goodbye to everybody, and, generally close out their life in a way that they find satisfactory, which I would argue is much more valuable.
Agreed.
And anything else.
Well, I totally agree with you, and I'm happy to if you've got a different example. What I would say the rub there is you could argue pragmatically the other way around. It's now just up to our opinions at that point about what's more useful, and it just doesn't feel good.
Can I ask a question, Hadi?
Yeah.
So I'm curious if we were to, for the sake of this conversation, grant that something being beneficial to you warrants belief in that thing. How then do we weigh the negative consequence of people having beliefs? Because we have many conversations with people of various different faiths on this show who are struggling very deeply and in a lot of pain because of their religious belief, often the same religious belief that gives benefits to other people. So how are you weighing, yes, this religion is true because it benefits me, against this religion has harmed other people who thought it was true? Can it be true for you and because it's beneficial, and not true for the people for whom it is not beneficial?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, Vi. That's something that I personally struggle with a lot. And that's because I am bisexual as well as Muslim, which, it's caused me some level of introspection on my faith. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
And, when I look at the history, when I look at not just the faith, but when I look at faith communities, what I see is that tolerance and intolerance come with times of strife and times of ease, right? When you're in a pressured, difficult situation, you tend to become more hateful, you tend to become more rejecting of others, and you tend to push maybe interpretations of a faith that are a little bit less kind. And when you're in times of ease, the reverse is true, right? If you look specifically, and I don't want to get into Islam specifically too deep, but I'll just say that historically, the homophobia that exists in the Islamic community wasn't there, right? And this is the same thing for the Christian community as well. If we go back pre-1200, the Christians didn't mind the gays. It wasn't a problem for them. This is something that comes with, it comes with the plague. It comes with economic difficulty. It comes with, the failure of the Crusades, right? So
That's an interesting
I would
theory.
say then that,
I'd definitely be interested in hearing more about that. I'm hesitant to agree off the top of my head just because it's not something I have sources for. My thinking, though, and thank you, by the way, for coming out like that.
Yeah.
I am also bisexual, so hi, nice to meet you.
hey,
But so can we recenter this real quick?
Well,
Are you gonna?
yeah. Okay, we'll make it 3. Hi,
Okay.
I'll come out with you too.
Yay, somebody
wow,
coming
this
out.
is rare company. 3
Yeah.
bisexuals in the same room.
Right?
Wow.
So, my next question then, and perhaps this is where we can jump into our next conversation next time, is does something have to be true to be beneficial? Right? Are those two things inextricably intertwined? Can you say this religion is beneficial to me? What does it give me? And list the things that this religion gives to you personally without also tacking on the trueness of that thing. Because to me, it would seem like if we can separate those two, then we can have a whole bunch of different conversations and suddenly we're not kind of stuck in this, but is it not true for the people for whom it's not beneficial? If it's just not a matter of it being true, if it is just we're looking at the pragmatic, the nature of belief itself, then we can say for some people it's useful and let's, unpack why. And then for some people it's not useful, but it doesn't necessarily link to its truth value.
I think that's a good place to go, because what I was going to bring this up a little bit earlier, but we kind of got lost a minute, is that I'm still not entirely convinced that, there is such a thing as a truth at all, or certainly not one that we can properly access. So I think that's a really good direction to take it to the next call.
You know what? Actually, the next caller has that question exactly. So that's going to be a perfect tie-in.
Oh, perfect.
Great.
Hadi, this is just fun.
Yeah,
Gosh,
I love these conversations.
Yeah, I honestly, I wish COVID wasn't a thing. I would sit down and have a beer with you, man. This would be fun. But I'm glad you're calling in. And
yeah, I really feel the same way.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, I hope to hear from you next week.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Take care.
Bye.
Yay. Okay.